Firstly, thanks for coming in and being willing to share your story a little bit with everyone. I've really enjoyed the past couple days. We've gotten to do some really good interviews and everything, and I'm sure you're not going to disappoint, so I'm excited.
I don't know about that.
No pressure or anything.
No.
But to kind of get started, just getting warmed up to things, I just wanted to ask if you could share a little bit of how you ended up in Hettinger and a little bit about your operation over the years.
Well, home place is 23 miles northwest. That's where I was born and raised. Spent 2 winters in Wahpeton, and otherwise everything else has been here.
Didn't venture too far from home then, did you?
Yeah.
And then where did your family migrate from, or your grandparents? Or how did they end up in?
The Winona area out of Minnesota. Okay. He come out on the, let's see, he come, I think the first time was into Dickinson on that train, and then come down from there. Otherwise, and later they were traveling here, plus they send cattle out of Reeder, you know, load them on by rail at that time. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Been here all the time.
All the time. And then over the years, did you farm and ranch? Did you have cattle?
Both
Sheep?
Cattle and no sheep.
No sheep.
No,
Just
I ended
cows.
up hauling a few, and that was close enough.
You were like, yep, nope, that's not for me. Thankfully, other people,
Yeah.
they like to have sheep, but not me.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. And then right next to us, there was no other sheep either at that time. So later years they came in the area, but otherwise I didn't have anything to do with them.
And no buffalo, alpacas,
No.
goats, nothing.
No.
Just cows. Okay. Glad we got that cleared out and everything. Okay, so you said you went to Wahpeton and then you came home. What did you study in Wahpeton?
It was part of it was auto electric, and then also welding, both gas and electric. 2 winters down there on that, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. And then you came back, and I'm assuming you always knew you were going to come back home then.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah. I was the only child, and at that time my dad did have quite a little back issues, so I just ended up staying.
Mm-hmm. And now as you look back on when you came home and being a young producer, and I'm sure there were challenges, what advice would you have for young people today as they're wanting to step back into agriculture and come home?
Well, I guess don't be afraid to ask questions. Listen, observe older people doing things too, plus times have changed and we've got to accept that and go ahead with it. But at the same time, don't forget, Dad helped you get where you are in the first place.
Totally fair, totally fair. Now, when you talk about how times have changed, are there any specific technologies that have changed over the years that have? Well,
yeah, we've went, one of the things that I've really noticed is when we went from summer following to no-till, seeding wheat and barley and oats. That probably stuck in my mind the most. And then the real advance in it that I've noticed, which I'm one of the crookedest drivers in the county I know when it comes to go down a field, is the, what do you call it, on the GPS systems on tractors and equipment, and then also the other equipment where you can have equipment that'll tell you if your shafts are turning on what you're using at combine or drills.
Now, I've had more than one person that has mentioned how they think one of the best changes they've seen over the years has been no-till. You know, as far as no-till goes, when did that really start taking root for people?
You know, I guess to put it in years, I couldn't pinpoint a year, I don't think, but one of the things I remember is I have relatives in South Dakota that were actually doing no-till before there was any even started in this area. And they were getting their equipment from Beach at that dealer up there. And that's when I started kind of watching it. And then it slowly moved in here, but I still didn't take a hold of it right away. But then I gradually did, and it definitely changed things for me. I mean, one of the things that really struck me was increasing the bushels per acre that you put on when you were seeding, because you went with more fertilizer, and it took a while for that to soak in up here. Plus, I was looking at the cost of it and everything, and I didn't want to replace a whole bunch of equipment all at once, and that's one thing I would kind of recommend to someone that's getting started. Don't go overboard on starting out, because maybe there'll be something you're going to want to change a little bit anyhow, and if you go too big, you got a big expense that's already there, and maybe you shouldn't have had it.
You know, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about how over Thanksgiving, my siblings and I, we branded and freeze branded our heifers, and we were just saying, like, now we have a squeeze. So a couple things have changed over the years, right? First off, instead of freeze branding in December over Christmas break, we always freeze brand over Thanksgiving, and the weather is always so much nicer. We would be so cold, and you have to take breaks to go up and warm up, and it was just miserable, right? And then, of course, our equipment over the years has changed. So when we first started off, we just had our chute, and it would take so long because you'd squeeze them up, and then you start the process, and then they'd start choking down. So you had to get them back up, stop what you're doing, get them back up, going over that, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, then we got smart, and we got one of those brisket bars, and that was night and day difference there. It really helped out so we could get through them a little bit faster. And then now we're really fancy. Dad recently was able to purchase a silencer, and so these last 2 years we've gotten to use the silencer, and oh my god, again, you go night and day difference from just having that brisket bar and everything, and it's so nice, and we just breeze through them. And but I was telling my brothers, I'm like, you know what? Someday when we have kids, I think we should make them have to freeze brand and brand the heifers for at least once or twice the old-fashioned way, and have to struggle through it a little bit just so they can appreciate these new technologies that we have, because I think it really teaches a person patience and just appreciation overall, right?
Mm-hmm. We started out with a wood chute with a rope that you pulled it and caught them and held them out. Then we ended up stand back and watch them run in and catch themselves. Other than calves, I guess you know how we took care of the calves for branding, and that everything just progresses and gets better. Mm-hmm. It takes a while for some of us to accept it, but that's number one. Don't be afraid to check into things at least.
And how over the years did you figure out which tactics you wanted to check into? How did you go about accepting new ideas?
Pretty much go and watch someone else do it, help, neighbors and what have you, because I was pretty much by myself and had to have help, and I did work, livestock especially. Otherwise, and then see how nice it works for them, and then go from there. It's been a change.
So dipping your toes in and slowly wading in, making observations and everything, I think that's a very practical way to go about it. Linda, I just talked with Linda, and we were talking about how a lot of times if you just kind of sit back and watch what's going on when you're going to neighbors to work cows, just sit back for 5-10 minutes, see what's going on, and then you don't even have to be told what to do. You can just kind of see where you can step in and help out, and just make things flow.
And you'd see that over the years, or I did. If you asked someone to help, the one that she either showed once or told them once, that really increases the efficiency of your job that you're doing at the time. Mm-hmm. And then you can get some that it just don't work.
Right, and you appreciate the help, but you're probably not asking them to come back.
That's true.
Okay, so my next kind of question too is talking about cattle and working cows. Do you have a favorite calving story?
I don't know which one to use. I guess one of the things that strikes me the most is right after we got married, my wife, she lived in town. She didn't even have a driver's license. Having her help me out in the wide open pasture checking cattle, here's a cow having trouble calving. And I hooked onto the equipment that I had in the pickup, which wasn't right for calving in the first place, but we fastened it on front legs, and then I had my wife backing a four-wheel drive pickup up and pulling the calf. And I should have turned her around so she couldn't see what she was doing, is what I should have done. But we got it done, but I wouldn't want to try it by myself. Too bad, it's got to be pretty serious. So. Mm-hmm. But that plus getting chased a few times, I guess, would be, but that really sticks in my mind. She didn't even argue. She was ready to help. That's good.
Yeah, you're a lucky guy to be able to find a gal that didn't grow up in the country, but was willing to just kind of jump in, and now's not the time to ask questions, so I'm not going to ask questions. I'm just going to do what needs to get done, and away we go.
She did wonderful.
How about on the flip side with cropping? Do you have a favorite, harvest or planting story there?
Well, harvest, yes, because I worked part of the time with the neighbors. We run 3 machines. He had 2 and I had 1, and they were all the same. And we would park those at night, side by side, so that his hired man would come along with a service pickup and fuel up all 3 combines. The one morning we got there, and the guy in the middle, which was pretty much the boss, he said, "Hey guys, come over here." He was up on top of his combine in the engine compartment. So we went over there, and here, after we'd parked those combines that night, his had caught fire in the engine compartment. And it burned the radiator hose off, and that sprayed and put the fire out. We could have lost 3 combines there, so simple. But after that, we learned you spread them out, don't put them so close together. That's one thing that really sticks in my mind, is serious. And the other is stupid on my part. We were combining it, and it really sticks in my mind. It was 11 o'clock at night. I come down the field. It was windy, and we were picking up windrows at the time. And my machine, I was in the middle or in front, somehow. And I got down to the end of the field, and I turned to come back, and the straw from the other machine was coming right at me. And it was a little hard to see. And I catch myself this late at night, sitting there, going in the cab with the dust going by on the outside. I had enough for that day. It was time to park it.
Park it and go home and go to bed.
Tired and didn't realize what you were doing,
I remember when I was younger, I was like an 8th grader, and I'd been raking for a couple years now, but we were in this field, and Harold was like, "Hannah, there's this big meter pole in this field. Like, make sure you don't hit the meter pole." I'm like, "Okay, got it, Harold." And then my dad comes up to me and he's like, "Hannah, there's a big meter pole in the field. Don't hit the pole." And I'm like, "Okay, got it. So I'm driving along, right? And here comes this meter pole, and I'm like, "Okay, Hannah, don't hit the meter pole. Don't hit the meter pole." But of course, when you're raking, like, you're wanting, like, heaven forbid, you leave a little swatch, right? And so I'm like trying to get the swatch, and then I'm gonna swing it around and swing back in real slick. And the whole time I'm like, "Hannah, don't hit the meter pole." And I don't know, my depth perception just wasn't very, very good. And no matter how many times I told myself not to hit the meter pole, I hit the meter pole and I bent the rake. And I will say I give my dad so much credit. We got done and everything, and I pulled off to the side of the field, and I'm just sitting there next to the rake, and I'm like, oh, this is not gonna be good. Like, this is not gonna be good at all. And my dad, and I'm like, Dad, I have something to tell you. Like, I hit that meter pole and I bent the rake, and he's like, oh, well, it doesn't look that bad. Well, you couldn't see the bend until you were like, you know, looking at it straight on. And he goes and checks it out. And, you know, he didn't yell at me. It was worse. He kind of just put his head in his hands, and he just like sat there for a little bit. And I was like, you know, I think I would have rather gotten my butt chewed out for hitting the meter pole than that be his reaction. But
it's stuff like that you remember, that's for sure.
Right, and I never made that mistake again. Like, I don't care how many little splotches I leave. I'm not going to be chancing it at all.
I wasn't quite that lucky. I didn't bend anything. I just busted it off. I pulled up to the highway, cutting highway ditches. Got all set to go and hit the electric switch and to pivot the swinger. Wiped out the stop sign. I didn't have to pay for that one either. But I mean, they were nice to work with. But it was bad on my part, hitting the wrong. But you're tense and not thinking, and other people watching you don't help either.
Right. Well, and I'm sure everybody has a story. We all go through those learning curves, and I know now whenever anything busts on the baler, my dad has to remind me, because I'm always like, well, what was I doing wrong, Dad? Like, what should I have been doing better? And finally, one time, he just looked at me and he's like, Hannah, sometimes machinery just breaks and there's nothing you could have done. Like, sometimes you could have done something, but other times it just wears out and it just breaks and you can't beat yourself up about it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You know, we were talking as far as when you think about the community, do you have a good story of the community coming together?
One thing that sticks in my mind, I wasn't old enough to be helping or driving at the time, but I was there. Our neighbors were hauling in hay in the fall, and spark from the tractor ignited a bunch of it and burned down a bunch of hay and his barn. Well, the fire department from, I don't know if Hettinger was involved, but the Reeder Fire Department was. And they got in there and they got everything, saved what they could for hay, busted through with some loaders and pushed the hay back. And then when the fire was all out and everything soaked down, the neighbors all went home, got their trucks and come back, and everything was completely cleaned up, scraped up and loaded. And it was after dark, but I'm not sure what time. Our dads had that whole area cleaned up and ready for the new building to be set up. That kind of sticks in my mind over the years, how they helped one another. You know, we had a fire one time and people came and helped us put it out too. And it's surprising when there's someone's in a bind, how people show up from all over. And I'm glad it's that way. People came with loaders. I mean, they did what they could with hay. It wasn't bales at that time. It was loose hay that he had put up. And they pushed what they could apart, but I mean, the barn was so badly burnt that they had to let the rest of it burn down and then clean the whole area, which that naturally left nails and stuff. So they took a certain amount of dirt even and loaded it on trucks and hauled it out. And he had a large pit at that time in his pasture, and they dumped it in there. And that was all cleaned up when it was over with.
And how did that make you feel, like, as far as the community coming together?
I guess it got my attention how people would accept something and get over there and help you, even if they weren't that close a neighbor. I mean, there was people from all over that showed up. I don't remember the whole details because I was pretty small at that time then. I'm sure wasn't even in grade school yet, probably.
But it left an impression with you as far
Yes.
as...
Yeah, helping others.
Well, and I'm guessing you would agree with this, but I think that's one of the best parts about living in a small community is that we may know everybody's business and what you ate for lunch and everything, but when it really boils down to it, if you're in need, we're going to come together and help you pull through.
Yeah. And they don't make any difference what it costs or anything. They're there to do it. So. And then the oil station where he bought gas and stuff, I remember a truck from there came there, and I don't remember the details on it other than he put gas in everybody's outfits. And it was gas, it wasn't diesel, so that it was back a few years.
What about, as it's kind of crummy outside, what would you say is the worst storm that you've lived through?
It was, it was a spring storm is what it was. And we turned out calves and cow pairs. And this hit, and it really was no warning, but it got bad. And my dad and I went out trying to find our cows and get them back home that had calved. I had a saddle horse and he had a pickup. And the first thing that kind of happened out there, we got out there and we got separated. I couldn't find him and he couldn't find me. So we kind of went about it ourselves. And when we ended up, actually, we got pretty near to the gate about the same time. He had some and I had some. But it burned and hurt the face so bad. But my horse was there to help. And he was out there. I was worried about my dad to begin with. And then I did hear the pickup, I remember one time. But it was that bad you couldn't see each other. That's what I can remember on that.
Right. Now, what's a favorite family tradition over the years?
I guess, that's been many years back. We don't do that anymore either. We used to go to Montana fishing, fly fishing. When I was even in high school, we did that. Otherwise, then of course the holidays, relatives from 50 miles away would come. My mother was originally from Lemon, so a lot of relatives from there. And you pick a holiday, some years we'd go that way, and some years they'd come back out to our place.
How about when you went fly fishing? Why was it out in Montana? What connections did you have there?
Fast water fishing in knee-deep water that you could just barely move around in. And to see who could do better than the other one, and we enjoyed trout fishing anyway, or trout fish to begin with. And so we liked it and stayed with it.
Now, was it your dad that taught you how to fly fish?
Yes.
Okay.
Same way with hunting. To this day, we still deer hunt.
It just brings back those memories.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's my list of questions for you and everything, but thank you again for sitting down. You did not disappoint, I want to let you know. You did a great job.